Hello, and welcome to Flint Talk Radio. I'm Sam Jahari.
And I'm Charlie Buckley. Good afternoon.
And we are Community Parent. Today I'm very pissed off, to be honest with you. And there's a few things I'd like to share with you. I want to let you know that we lose people every 24 minutes to drugs and alcohol. Okay? It's just crazy. I got this thing that came over on the internet, and I wanted to share with you. You know, the pharmaceutical industry does not create cures. They create customers. It's all about money, ladies and gentlemen. That's all they care about. They do not care about your health or well-being. They just care that somebody's getting rich off of you. And there is no cures anymore.
No, I agree with you, Sam. You know, anytime, money, the old expression, money's the root of all evil.
Exactly.
And it's obviously you need currency. It's a necessity. However, these big, especially the big pharmaceuticals, they do some good things. However, and I think their body of work as a whole.
I think originally when this thing started out, and doctors, they have this
Hippocratic oath.
Exactly. This oath, they mean well. Just like our politicians, I think they mean well in the beginning. Then they start seeing the money flowing in, and somewhere they forget why they're there. I always thought that a doctor, it was a calling. It was, to do God's work, really. Taking care of people's health and stuff. And I find that the money just takes over, and they forget the reason that they became doctors. They forget the reason that they ran for office. And it's driving me crazy. I get this burning inside of me. And for everybody that you think this is an inner city problem, okay, I'm going to read something for you. For anyone who thinks heroin use isn't a suburban problem, here's a wake-up call. 90% of all heroin users, 90%, it's white suburbanites, okay? This is reality check, ladies and gentlemen. And here's another thing. 4 out of 5 heroin users, okay, they begin with prescription drugs, okay? And it doesn't necessarily mean have to be the opiates. It's the benzodiazepines or
benzodiazepines. Actually, yeah, there's been benzodiazepines have been hitting the news a lot, especially the past couple weeks. I've noticed. I remember back when Heath Ledger had his overdose. The benzos, as they're referred to, were also played a part in that. And I remember when I did my stint inside the bubble down there in Brighton, they talked about the benzodiazepines, how sometimes they're even harder to get out of your system. The other thing, before I forget this, Sam, I found out that with the opiates, the prescription opiates, when you're on them for a long period of time, it actually leaches into your bones. So even though it may be out of your bloodstream, as far as being detectable, it takes years for it to actually come back out of your bones into your system, allow your kidneys and everything, to flush them out.
Well, exactly. An addiction doctor, he was saying that here's something that's given to you for pain, where it actually causes you pain. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so hard to come off of it. I keep preaching that one hand can't clap by itself, and I'm surprised that we don't get more people to call in and give us their input and their feelings about this. The whole thing is, don't wait till this is at your doorstep, because it's going to come. It's coming, okay? It's already hitting your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, okay, if it's not at your doorstep already. The whole thing is, we need to get involved. That means everybody, because you think, well, this is only 10% of our population. This affects everybody. Everybody.
Because, look at the process that happens. there's a perceived need that something's going on terribly, especially when the people are better heeled, well heeled in the suburbs. So they go to their congressman and senator. We got to do something. So they enact legislation that the original intent, like you're talking about, is really decent, to try to do something. But the consequences that now we're surrendering more of our freedoms, there's more cost attached to it. People are becoming, the law enforcement's going overboard on enforcement. They're becoming vicious with their enforcement. It has an impact on everybody. We suffer every time somebody cries out, there's got to be something done about it. There's a politician say, hey, I can do something about it, and it's going to cost
That's what they
dearly.
want. They want to keep adding more time in prisons. But nobody talks about treatment. That's where it's got to come. Is in the treatment, and the whole thing is, for treatment won't cost us near as much as it's costing us to put these people in prison and stuff. And a lot of times, what's happening is these aren't the losers. These aren't the deadbeats. These are not people that you write off. Okay, our government wants to write off this 10%. Because they feel like they're losers or they're deadbeats or whatever. But these are the cream of the crops. These are very intelligent people that we are losing to this epidemic.
Well, we've spoken in the past, it's just incarceration now. There is no rehabilitation.
Exactly.
And with just to pick a drug that they can easily track statistically and look at the metrics involved, the cost of incarceration to the U.S. taxpayer for marijuana offenses alone is $1 billion. And that does not take into account what the cost is to the family as far as loss of spousal support, financially, loss of parental support emotionally. Then it trickles down to the employer. You have a good employee, and now he's in jail for 6 months.
Or the another thing is when a person comes out, they can't find employment
right.
because they got a conviction on
Absolutely.
it.
Exactly.
And
well,
that's
where we got to break the stigma. These are people that are very intelligent. Like I said, they're usually the cream of the crop. What happens is they fall on hard times, or they're in pain, or something happens where they get medicated, or they'll go on a binge and start drinking. Okay, and 10% of us, this is like playing Russian roulette, where they go down a path that it's hard to come out of.
Well, there's nobody, there is no person or organization in society that's not affected by this.
Exactly.
You might not be the addict yourself, but even if you're not, it affects it's a cancer. It truly is. When I was down in Jackson at the state prison talking to some folks a couple weeks ago, one of the gentlemen said to me, he said, Charlie, I came in here on marijuana-related offenses the first time. He said, I left as a heroin addict because it was easy to get heroin in to the prisons.
Yep.
Well,
that's the whole thing is, there's so much money in this drugs and heroin and everything else that a lot of corruption sets in. And, I remember my daughter, she would tell me at her school, you can walk down the hallway and get whatever you want. Okay, that's at a school. And then she told me, she says, you don't think they know what's going on here? They know, they just turn their backs. Maybe they're even helping bringing it in. I don't know, but I'm very pissed off. I want things to change, and they just can't come fast enough.
Yeah.
My daughter, growing up, her mom was an addict, so she had the addiction personality or addiction genes or the brain disease or whatever you want to call it. Okay, through her upbringing, they kept wanting to label her. She's ADD. She's ADHD. And who is this coming from? It's not a doctor. It's their counselor, their teachers. All of a sudden, they're doctors. And every time they would say something, I would go to my doctor. Does she have this? And my doctor's like, well, if she has it, it's not severe or anything like that. We don't want to medicate her, And the whole thing is, after Brianna's mom died, she was 13, 14 years old now, that I'm sure she was feeling the pain of a loss, that she started drinking. She started experimenting with pot and prescription drugs. So, here are her counselor, because I always had her in therapy and stuff, to work things out. And at this point, her therapist says, well, she's bipolar, that's why she's self-medicating. At this point, as a parent, I'm not educated in that field. I don't know any better. So I think, well, maybe she is, and then they got her on Adderall, they got her on antidepressants, they got her on all of these. Thinking back, this is the start of it all. That was the start of it all.
It's like the medicine is the knee-jerk response. Medication.
Exactly.
Another thing is, too, I'm not a strict behaviorist, but I see value in the behaviorist approach in psychology. A lot of, like ADHD and stuff, I think, is because they don't have the strategies in place to teach people who have that. They have like a different way of learning than the average person. Some people, the bulk of the population can learn from somebody sitting up and lecturing them, staying up there in front of them, talking about stuff and showing them. Other people have to just interact with it themselves. So there's different learning strategies we all embrace. But that's the reason why I'm against public education. They want a one-size-fits-all approach to kids. And I think they have to, the best of thing, if you're going to have the public schools, they're going to have a variety of ways of teaching people, set up already with the way they present the material. And give them the opportunities to do what they can best with,
Look what we've done with children that suffer from dyslexia. Years ago, a generation ago, they would have automatically been kind of shunned from the academic community. They would have been labeled as slow or unable to learn or unteachable. And now they can give them those tests verbally. And, they're just as intelligent and just as capable of learning as anybody else.
Another thing is they found out, too, I don't know if you saw this, but dyslexics are hired now because even though they have this inability, they turn words to oral numbers, they can't really conceive of that, they don't see it the way the average population might be able to see it. That's all subjective. But they're actually hiring dyslexics because they find that they have better spatial, a grasp of spatial relationships.
Right.
And that's where it's a strategy that they learn. It's already in them. That's the way they learn. They gravitate towards seeing the world through that lens.
Well, there was somebody made a comment about the ADHD epidemic, or the autism epidemic. And people want to talk about vaccinations and everything else, but they said if Thomas Edison, if Thomas Edison was born today, he would be labeled ADHD. Einstein, they gave several examples. Einstein, Thomas Edison, probably Ben Franklin. They would have been labeled ADHD. We wouldn't have. Beethoven was the other one, and everybody knows
Mozart, because
right.
they're obsessed. They concentrate so much on one area.
Right.
Yeah.
So they would have been labeled ADHD, medicated. Their creativity would have been just flatlined, and we wouldn't have all the cultural and technological advances that we take for granted today.
I have a friend named who used to do a show for me called Hippie Conservative, and he said the same point years before everybody else was saying. He goes, if it was they were born more this time, those guys you just mentioned, we wouldn't have had all these great inventions, these great lifestyle, labor, decreasing activities, and products to actually give us more free time. We wouldn't have them because everybody who else had this drive to push for that would be labeled as hyperactive. You got to be medicated. See, they want a dumbed down, very docile population. If it's not designed, that's certainly the effect.
They want lemmings. They want the folks just to fall in line and toe that cultural norm, whatever the norm is, and that's what they want because there's no waves. If they can, they did studies in communist Russia, and they said how come in communist Russia it was so hard for people to get toilet paper, but they had no problem getting vodka, and they said that because the government allowed the people to have access to the vodka because they were then dependent on the vodka. They would do anything for that drug. They would hang somebody for selling heroin, but they'd give them all the vodka they wanted.
I think what's happening is they want to keep us all drugged up so we can close our eyes to everything that's going on around us.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's like it's nuts. How many people do we have to lose, before we do the right things? Yeah. And how many people do we have to lose before we get a wake-up call and everybody opens their eyes and say, hey, we need to do something here, I lost my child. I can't bring her back, you know. But with your help, hopefully we can save your child, you know. With your help, we can save your neighbor's child. We need to come together as a people, you know. We need to come together as a people to be a village again, to care for one another. The world has just gotten crazy. It's too crazy, you know. And it takes everybody. It takes the village to make things happen.
Well, you know, Sam, the epidemic, especially amongst your daughter's generation, is particularly tragic and poignant and evident. All you have to do, all anybody has to do, is go to a treatment center, and I'll use Brighton for an example. I've been there 3 times in the past week for various reasons, and they have an NA meeting every day, every night at 7:30, and an AA meeting every night at 7:30, and you walk in the main door, and then it splits, and the NA meeting's down this hallway, the AA meeting's down this hallway. 95%, in my opinion, both from when I did my inpatient there and from what I've seen since, of the people that are in there, if they're going to AA, they're 30, 40 and above in age. 99% of the people in NA are under 25.
Exactly.
And as young as 17, 18.
Right.
I mean, and some of these 17-year-olds, it's their 3rd, 4th stint in rehab. I mean, I'm glad that they're still alive. I'm glad they're not giving up. I'm glad they're getting help. But if you're 17 years old and you're already doing your 3rd or 4th stint in rehab, when did it start?
Well, I think the whole thing is we don't really give them the treatment to go the long haul. We give them 7 days, and they already know they're coming back.
Yeah.
You know, if they really want to get help, they're going to be back. The whole thing is, why don't we nip this in the butt right away? You know, and that Kristen was saying, you know, we had Kristen from the Odyssey House, and she said they don't, because the person, if they did this where they sent them to long term, they don't see the effect of it, or they won't get credit for it.
It's not instant. We are an instant gratification society. ATMs, 24-hour grocery stores. When we were growing up, you had 3 channels on the TV. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Anita Bryant or whoever it was came on and sang the, God Bless America. Then it went to the test pattern. Now it's, 24 hours a day, 300 channels, and there's nothing good to watch.
Exactly. And almost 10 channels or 20 channels they're selling something.
Right, infomercials. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, there's a lot more than that for the infomercials.
It's interesting what you were talking about before. I just pulled up something off of the Vancouver Sun, and this was from May 31st. It said in Vermont, they're talking about the heroin epidemic. And they said that in Vermont, for example, the crisis is so acute that the governor recently said what started as an OxyContin and prescription drug addiction problem in Vermont has now grown into a full-blown heroin crisis. We have seen an over 250% increase in people receiving heroin treatment here in Vermont since 2000. So 250% increase in 14 years.
And when do we start this war on terror and the intervention of the Middle East and Afghanistan? At that time.
Yeah.
So.
And the greatest percentage of the increase, nearly 40% in just the past year. And that's Vermont.
Yeah.
People think of Vermont, they think of Ben and Jerry's and skiing and when the summer of love ended, all the hippies either went to Vermont or they went to Seattle.
Exactly.
A little group of them went to Sedona, but pretty much those are the 2 directions they went. And I love Vermont. Spent a lot of time, grew up in New England. And it's a very healthy, very organic, very crunchy culture, and
very wealthy too.
Oh, absolutely.
Very very high incomes.
Yeah.
Well, that's just it. Drugs, they don't care how much money you have. They don't care where you live. It's not just in Vermont. It's in Michigan. It's in Ohio. It's in every state. Every town is being affected.
Well, that's why I picked Vermont on this example, because name a big urban city in Vermont. There isn't one.
Yeah.
There's not a Chicago, a Detroit, a New York, an LA. It's Vermont, for God's sakes. There's more cows than there are people.
You know,
Exactly.
the real bad heroin addiction I seen go on back when I was before I was a teenager, was up in the area my grandparents lived up north of here, about 120 miles. The people he had run into were also, the family, about 4 of the family members all strung out on heroin. And we're finding the dirty needles and stuff when we're cleaning the house up after they got, evicted because they weren't paying the rent for a better part of a year. And that was the first time I actually seen the full manifestation. That was 120 miles north of the industrial city of Flint. So.
Exactly. 90% suburbanites. Okay, you know what? We've been in front of over 45,000 kids, and I seen the most problems were like in farm towns, whereas the most epidemic or the most of the heroin use that came forward anyways.
Well, where do you think all the crystal meth is being made?
Exactly.
It's not being cooked in the bathtubs in the inner city. It's in the single wides and the farmhouses and everything else out in the country.
A few months ago, they actually it was up here in Center Row, the Elga parking lot, the Elga credit. There was a truck that says mobile meth lab or something like that, and it actually was in fact a mobile meth lab. They had stopped,
Yes, I remember they busted them or
and they actually had
something.
it labeled as such, and it was like, and sure enough, they stopped traffic in all that area, and you couldn't come in or go out, and they had that under for like a contamination or environmental contamination, because God knows what they put in meth. That stuff's crazy.
Well, I remember about 10 years ago, I was out in Amarillo, Texas, and Amarillo and Lubbock, it's nothing but flatlands and cotton fields. And I was staying at a hotel for a trade show, and in the middle of the night, all these Texas Rangers came busting into the hotel. And we're like, what in the world is going on? Well, somebody had rented 2 adjoining rooms at the end of the hallway, and they had put the do not disturb sign on for like a week. And then they started noticing these smells and stuff. They thought at first that they were going to find a body. What they were doing is using the 2 bathtubs, and they were just cooking meth in a hotel. That way, if it blew up, they're not blowing up in their own house. Insanity.
I have a friend who lives in rural Missouri, and he says down there you got to be careful where you walk through because he likes to hike. If you come across somebody's got a meth lab, he said you're going to get murdered. A lot of people did get, and you don't hear about that in the press.
Right.
People just hiking or doing outdoor activities run or follow these meth makers, and they buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I lost my child February 14th, 2011. And we formed this community parent. And, Tony Brown, he would say, we need to stop the nosebleed. And I think we've actually made a lot of strides, but we never really hear about the good, or very few that actually come forward and say, hey, man, you saved my life or whatever. But we hear about the ones that we lost. And for every one that we hear about, there's probably 10, 20 that we don't hear about. But, there's a thing that came across on Facebook, and it says you cannot save everyone. Some people are going to destroy themselves no matter how much you try to help them. But does that mean we stop or we don't try to help them? No. Okay? I think the whole thing is there's coalition groups coming out every day in different parts of our country, in different towns and cities, against drugs, against heroin, against this epidemic. Okay? And I'm a strong believer that the louder we are, the more things we can get done. And that means by the more people that come together, the more things are going to get done. The more things are going to get changed. We don't want our government to think that 10% is okay to be sacrificed.
No.
Because this affects everybody. Everybody.
And I think too many people, Sam, until how I feel about your loss. but too many people, when it's not their daughter or their niece or their granddaughter or a friend, it's somebody else's problem. You know, it's kind of easy for people to put their head in the sand and say, you know, no, not in my house. And then, you know, you just better pray that you're not that you don't end up being part of that 10%. And you know, with what we do with Community Parent Chasing the Dragon in the schools, you know, since its inception, was it 50,000 students, you know, that we've spoken in front of and educated and tried to bring awareness to. On virtually, it's hard to even call it we have a budget. I mean, we have a budget, but it's pretty easy to budget when you don't have an income. You know what I mean? We rely, you know, if somebody can afford to bring us in. I mean, we're not making any money.
Exactly.
And, you know, the Democratic senator from New York, Chuck Schumer, just asked for $100 million in federal funds to fight heroin trafficking. Well, last time, and this was just for New York and New Jersey, high traffic areas. Well, last time I checked, you know, we have Homeland Security, the Border Patrol. If we really wanted to stop the importation of heroin, it would seem that if we can stop nuclear bombs from coming in, and we can stop illegals from coming in, if we can stop, you know, all these things from coming in, that what they're doing is throwing money at, in a way, incarceration. Again, it's a different form of incarceration, but think about what 1% of that $100 million. If they gave us, for example, $1 million in the next year, we could talk to kids in every state in the country.
Exactly.
And if you can educate and make people aware, you know, there's just as many cigarettes available today as there were 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but there's less people smoking. Education and awareness.
Exactly.
You think, okay, you went through addiction, but yours is you didn't get attracted to the street drugs. Yours is
Correct.
Okay, but I think a lot has to be said too that kids romanticize, you know, these people who are using drugs like these, you know, the rock stars, the you know, the celebrities, you know, they're illicit drugs, and they kind of make that larger than life. You're a legend if you use that.
Yeah.
If you use this, you become a legend. I mean, how can that be combated? I think it's like kind of really bizarre. You have the media talking about and doing all these great documentaries and these shows at the Down Hours, like Requiem for a Dream. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. Horrific scene, imagery, very stark. I had a friend who was a heroin.
Trainspotting.
Yeah, Trainspot. Yeah, and the book was even worse because it talks about, I mean, they actually showed it talked about some of the scenes in the bedrooms and stuff like that. It was pretty disgusting, you know, the filth it was in. But, you know, physical filth, not mental. But anyway, you have Hollywood, you have the movie makers basically on one hand saying this is a problem, yet glamorizing it in the same breath. You know, it just, what is it, good or bad? I mean, I'm sure the kids are getting confused with these images.
Well, you know, Peaches Geldof, Bob Geldof's daughter, just died of a heroin overdose. Now, here's a young lady that grew up in this rock and roll environment, to put a label on it. She has seen firsthand, witnessed the destruction.
Exactly.
But so, as you said, so much of it is glamorized. I have a good friend who said that he never wanted to try heroin until he read Anthony Kiedis, the lead singer from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, until he read his book Scar Tissue, which talks about his addiction and recovery. He said, but the addiction portion of the book made it seem so glamorous, you know, for the lack of a better word, that he couldn't wait to try it.
The friend of mine, she was using this down south. She was a heroin addict. She went through recovery. She was several years in recovery. She read that book. She felt such a pull towards that again. She had to call her therapist or the guy that works with her on substance abuse. And they had to meet in the middle of the night. They had to meet at a cafe. So to basically talk her through this and why she don't want to go back to this. But that book was so vivid. It brought back so many, resonated so well with her that it was almost pretty damaging to her, you know, for her recovery.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's nothing glamorous about this, ladies and gentlemen. This will take everything away from you. This will put you on the corner selling your ass, whether you're a male or female. This will make you do everything and anything to get your drugs. You become the criminal, you become a piece of shit. You look at in the mirror and you wish you were dead. This is what it does to you. Okay? Drugs are nothing glamorous about it. There is nothing glamorous about it. My daughter, she suffered with addiction for 2 years. 2 years of hell that we went through. I don't know all the stuff that she went through. She didn't tell me everything, but I can just imagine. And I think when you're an addict, you get to a certain point that you just give up. You just give up and you wish you were dead.
Well, the insanity of it, and it is poignant, Sam, because you speak to our audience and to the students that we speak to from the perspective of a father. And many times you've heard me when I follow you up that no parent should have to bury a child. I can't even begin to fathom, as the father of two, what that pain is like. I can't. I can try to put myself in your shoes, but to really wrap my arms around it, it's impossible. And then when I talk to them, and when Alvon and anybody, when we speak to these kids, we're all sharing our personal story. We're not actors. Nobody's giving us a script.
Right.
Nobody's telling us what to say. They'll tell us what we can't say. Can't mention God, can't mention religion, can't mention the spiritual solution. But again, it's not a Christian God. It can be a Hebrew God, a Muslim God, a pagan God. It's just a higher power. But even that we're not allowed to talk about. But I remember sitting in treatment hearing these stories, from people from the outside coming in to speak to us, and thinking to myself, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. You did what? You did, and it's funny, you were talking to my dad last week. My mom and dad were in town for my son's graduation.
Sure.
Thursday, I was doing some cleaning in the house. My mom was downstairs. My dad was outside with somebody looking at something, a gutter or dryer vent or something. And I went underneath the bathroom sink in my bathroom, and I moved something, and what's in the back corner? An empty bottle of Smirnoff. Now, Friday was 8 months since I've had anything to drink, any drugs. 8 months. And I'm a neat freak. I'm a clean freak. I mean, I scrub everything, but I hadn't moved. It was like behind rolls of toilet paper and stuff. Part of me, I did laugh because I'm like, oh my God. I was like, is the leprechaun vodka fairy coming in and like hiding things on me in the middle of the night? But two things occurred to me. At least 8 months ago, I stashed that bottle there. Have no recollection. I mean, I don't have a recollection of a lot for about 2 years, but zero recollection. I mean, none. The other two things that I thought were odd is it was empty. So why would I stash an empty? That's not doing me any good.
Oh, I know.
And why did I stash a pint? I never bought pints. I bought half gallons. And I'm able to laugh about it now because I'm out of the grips. I mean, it's a 24-hour pass.
Sure.
But I'm out of the grips of it. But I'm thinking to myself, the insanity. I mean, here I am in my bathroom, and there's a pint bottle stuck behind the toilet paper under the sink. And this is, if you remember, a few months before that, I found a half gallon empty in the bottom of a garment bag. And you wonder, and I hate to bring this up, but I have to ask because I thought about it at the time. And I'm sorry to spring this on you. And by the way, we don't talk about things before we go. It's not like I say, Sam, I'm going to ask you this, or we're going to talk about this. But after Brianna's passing, have you guys cleaned out her bedroom or, neatened it up, or some people kind of leave things the way they are? Mm-hmm. Did you find stuff that was, I don't want to say hidden, but where you're just like, oh man, it was worse than not that it could be worse than you thought because she's gone, but
yeah. My daughter's room stayed the way it was till about 8-10 months ago that we finally cleaned it out. At the time that she overdosed, the sheriff had came in and they found, needles and stuff like that, and they took that with them. But I remember Brianna had a probation officer, and she came in and she went up to her room, and she found heroin in. Brianna had a stereo, and in the back of it was where the batteries go. That she had hidden it back there. Now, if I'm gonna hide something, I hide it like in plain sight.
Right.
Where people don't think it, but I would have never thought in the battery.
Yeah, I mean,
and their probation officer comes out, I found this, is like, wow, just to give you a little touch on addiction and what you go through. Brianna went to, they sent her to rehab a few times, 7 days, 9 days.
I want to finish your story, but I want to talk about that, the length of stay.
And then finally, they sent her for this program. It was like 4 months, but in between, she was given a tether that she cut off her foot and took off. She would run away from home. Now, granted, Brianna was 15, her boyfriend was 18. Then when you talk to, the police or the sheriff, oh yeah, we got him. We can keep him away from her and stuff. But the whole thing is, everything was about, now she was a minor, but really as a minor, she was asked whether to go to drug court. She wanted to go to this runaway center. If she wanted to do, how about this place or this place? It was like she was given options instead of like as somebody that's the guardian. They never asked me. They wouldn't look at me and, well, what am I here? But now every time that she was going to go in front of the judge or whatever, I had to be there. Every time they sent her to rehab or a treatment center, I have to be involved, But to make these decisions, it was like crazy. I didn't understand that, And as a 15-year-old, she had to press charges on her boyfriend, Brianna never would admit they're having sex, but it wasn't. Didn't ask like, what would you like done, as a guardian, which is crazy. It's crazy. There's a lot of things that happen that you're ashamed and you don't want to bring it out on the surface. But I say, hell no. I want things to change, and that only way we can make a change is by bringing it out on the surface. Don't put your heads in the sand and say it's not happening in your home. While it is, okay? Don't be like me. I was embarrassed and I didn't want to do anything about it. I didn't want anybody to know what was going on in my home. Because nothing gets done that way. You can't hold people accountable. I turned my daughter into a system that failed me and failed her miserably. And it's not that, I take this anger to change things, not to put anybody down or whatever. This is what drives me. This is what burns the flame inside me to change things, because I can't bring Brianna back. Brianna was a wonderful, wonderful child, very intelligent. She was a debater. She played sports. She was beautiful. Everybody that she came across, she was not a loser. Okay, everybody that she came across, she just had so much love and compassion, especially children and pets. But drugs, they changed her. I know she called me Daddy Pie, and I was her everything. Brianna, when she was in the 5th grade, she told me to come to the school, and I was like, Brianna, what did you do? She's like, Daddy, I didn't do anything, but I need you to come to the school. So when I got to the school, she had wrote this book. It said My Daddy Pie. And that was me, and then when I came in, she got to read it. And I came across this book the other day. My daughter was just a wonderful, wonderful person. And at the funeral, I couldn't believe how many people she touched, how many people was there, to give their condolences and stuff. And that was when it was like, no, I'm not ashamed. I'm very proud of the person she was. And because of her, I want things to change for other families. I don't want you to lose your children because this pain, it aches. It aches. And this hole in your heart never goes away. Please, join us. Call me. Call us. Let's hear your opinion. Be part of the solution. Get your head out of the sand. Let's make things happen.
I think that's it, Sam, is, you and organizations like ours, we are very vocal. If it's very sad that you realize that at the foundation of virtually every organization or cause such as ours, there's a tragedy. And then people, yourself, myself, Alvon, Rob, Pastor Mark, we're all trying to make the best out of a tragedy. And it was probably a month, 8 weeks ago, you and I were talking about some of the proposed mandatory jail times for possession and for dealing. And what a farce some of it is. You're going to criminalize a public health issue. They find somebody with possession of heroin, cocaine, marijuana, whatever, and they want to have this type of jail time. And my equation at the time was, okay, you have somebody with lung cancer, you find them with a pack of cigarettes, are you going to lock them up? No. They're addicted to the nicotine. It's a different type of addiction, but it's an addiction just the same. Well, about 2 weeks ago, the House was talking about prison sentences for heroin dealers, and what they settled on, and it was House Bill or SB 87. The House voted 54-33 in favor of, and first offense would land what they're calling peddlers in prison for 50 years, and putting dealers away for up to 99 years on subsequent offenses. Now, the knee-jerk reaction to that is, well, great, if we lock up the dealers, well, the reality is there's a long line of people just waiting to take that gamble, to roll those dice to make the money. And the other issue is typically, and I don't have any statistics to support this, but typically the dealer's an addict themselves.
Exactly.
And they're selling to support their own habit. Not that makes it any better, but they're selling to support their own habit. You actually can get more prison time under this bill for selling heroin than you can for rape or murder. And yes, it's easy to, and I could very easily argue the other side and say, okay, heroin dealers are murderers.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I get that. I don't have a quick and easy solution or answer to this, but it's, you have to follow the stream back, to the traffickers and to the where it's being, right now there's a lot of cheap heroin, the tar heroin being made in Mexico. It's dirt cheap. And I watched a program, and they talked about the effect of NAFTA. And this was, nothing happens, there's not one thing that happens without another effect. When NAFTA was enacted, the Mexican corn crop basically went away because we're selling, U.S. farmers are selling bioengineered corn for less than it costs them to produce it because of the subsidies. It shut out the Mexican corn crop, caused one of three things to happen. The Mexican farmers, they either became, if you can imagine this, even more impoverished. They came across the border illegally, or they went to other means. Well, let's make heroin. And then you've got all the angel white or whatever they want to call it from Afghanistan, and the powdered heroin coming in. I don't know if there's a statistic. Maybe for next week I'll look at that about the percentage of heroin that's being produced in the United States. Well, it seems to me that most of it's coming in from outside of our borders. Well,
Who's turning their eyes?
right, somebody
their
is,
backs on it.
or who's putting their
Who's
hand
getting-
out.
Yeah, exactly. Who's
You know?
getting paid for this to come through?
Because think about how many years we put up with the Medellin cartel in Colombia and Pablo Escobar. I mean, he was basically doing that with U.S. government approval.
Exactly.
They were just looking the other way. So,
Exactly. This is how many people are we going to sacrifice? It's nuts. The whole thing is open your eyes, people. Open your eyes to what's happening in our country. All right. Open your eyes to see how many people we are losing, and oh yeah, let's just throw $1 million here, or let's throw $1 million.
100 million.
That's not the solution. That is not the solution. Guess what? This $100 million, who ends up with this money is people of their friends or whoever. Okay, that's how it is. Okay, that's the reality. It doesn't go, put $100 million for treatment. You want something to get done, where we take care of this. I had this judge, he told me, he says, well, if you didn't have the need or the want, then you wouldn't have the drugs. Does that make sense? But it's okay for pharmaceutical to be the biggest drug dealers there is, because they are, okay? They don't tell you, 4 out of 5 heroin users, they start with prescription drugs, okay? Prescription drugs. And guess what? It's our doctors that are getting our people. The number one high for 12 to 13-year-olds, it's not marijuana, it's not drinking, it's prescription drugs. And guess what? A lot of times people get hurt or they have a problem, they go to the doctor and the doctor gives them some kind of medication, and it's that bullet in the chamber. Okay, you don't know if it's going to go off. 10% of them, okay, they become addicts. And guess what? The person that got you started, that doctor, he 9 out of 10 times he'll turn his back on you. Oh, you're an addict? I can't have you anymore. Don't come to my office.
Well, that or they're networking. The people who are using this stuff will find out doctors are essentially feel goods. You write your prescription for anything, and they'll just go there.
Well, that's just it. They just think there's a pill for everything. Okay, there's a pill for everything.
Look what you said about when you went through losing your daughter, and you went to a doctor, and they give you a prescription, another prescription. The paradigm, I guess, has got to be addressed. I mean, the current paradigm. I mean, that's the knee-jerk reaction. I mean, when I was in college, I remember people were so anxious about going to classes and doing well in classes. They were taking what was it back then? Not Vicodins. They were taking Valium, and their doctors are prescribing Valium because of anxiety and all this stuff. And went, sometimes you got to feel tense. I mean, and they thought they were so much different than anybody else who uses street drugs. I mean, and maybe it was because my experience with people, seeing addiction, and I'm first saying bases. And I said it. I said, you're using that pill, but it's a chemical. It's changing your behavior. How are you different than somebody using a street drug?
Exactly.
And they got so angry with me because I was basically calling into question.
Because it's okay. I'm
Because he went to a doctor. Right.
The whole thing is, as a society, we are not to feel anymore. That's the only way we can cope is to feel. Okay? I tell you what. There's no pill that solves anything. All it does is it gets you all loopy. I don't care if you're in pain or whatever. The pain doesn't go away. You're just now loopy. So
You just
you're
don't
thinking
care.
somewhere else.
Right.
That it doesn't.
The pain's still there. You just don't care.
Exactly. And that's what it is. We medicate to cover the symptoms. but we do not take care of the problem. We do not heal anybody anymore. Okay, that's just, we have to find some different answers.
Well, something I just spoke about before, and I hadn't done enough research, and it doesn't discount anything I said, but Courtney Love, widow of Kurt Cobain
Yeah,
and Nirvana,
yeah.
former heroin addict.
Sure.
She's talking about Peaches Geldof, Bob Geldof's daughter, and how Peaches, in April, when Peaches Geldof passed away, in the post-mortem, they found out that she'd been using heroin, and due to the levels in her body, that was probably 25-year-old mother of two. Yeah. However, Courtney Love talks about how Peaches and an unidentified young man came to visit her at the Chateau Marmont, I believe it was, or the Chateau Marmont in Beverly Hills in Hollywood. And he had a bag full of prescription drugs, including opiate-based OxyContin. He had over 500 pills in the bag. Pills. Pills. What I didn't know was that 14 years before Peaches Geldof overdosed and died, her mother died of a heroin overdose. I was talking before about seeing it firsthand from the celebrity rock and roll, being in that type of environment. I didn't know that her mother...
Oh, yeah, well, Michael Hutchins, too, he was involved with, I think it was Peach's mother, and Michael Hutchins from NXS. Anyway, he committed suicide because because some kind of issue about the divorce or, visitation rights, and Bob Geldof, Peach's dad, was like fighting over that. So he basically... They might have been the precipitating event to cause him to commit suicide, Michael Hutchins. So, what was it, autofixation thing, whatever?
Autoasphyxiation.
Fixation, yeah, autofixation thing. That's, never been, in my mind, it's never been cleared up. And I felt it was bad because NXS was a great band, in my opinion. I mean, I loved to have seen them in concert, but, here these guys, these people just live such destructive lives, and they impact everybody else. And that's what our kids are emulating because they want attention. And those people get attention,
Well, let's take Michael Jackson. Okay, Michael Jackson, he got hurt in the Pepsi commercial. His head got caught on fire or something. A few months later, he's getting himself into treatment from the Vicodin. And that was a start. Now, as addicts, we bounce. They bounce from one thing to the other. Okay, I'm not going to do the prescription drugs, I'll start drinking. I'm not going to drink, I'll smoke marijuana. If I'm not going to smoke marijuana, I'm going to... So we go from one thing to another. Addiction now doesn't necessarily mean drugs either, okay? But the drugs are very destructive to your health, put it that way, okay? The gambling, pornography, all of these, I mean, you kind of got them under control, I guess, or it doesn't really self-destruct. But with Michael Jackson, what happened? The Vicodins were the first thing. He went into treatment. Then all of a sudden, Michael Jackson can't sleep. He can't sleep, so, he needed to have somebody knock him out. That was the only way he was going to go to sleep. Addiction is very, very dangerous, and it affects all of us, not just the addict.
There's an interesting study, you talk about the insanity of addiction, where they've done it with opiates, and they've done it with, like with cocaine, and they'll take mice, lab rats, and they will allow the mice or the rats to ingest the cocaine or the opiate, and then they make it so that the only way they can ingest it is to stand on basically like a plate that will give them an electrical charge. That would normally, you get shocked and they would back off. They will put up with the electrical charge to the point of death to consume the opiate or the cocaine. There was an article in the New York Daily News, May 18th. Sheep are acting like heroin addicts. They're committing suicide after eating a poisonous plant. It said that hundreds of sheep in Australia have committed suicide after eating and become addicted to a poisonous plant. Some 800 sheep died after eating the darling pea plant, then bashing their heads open like heroin addicts.
Wow.
The plant is toxic to the animals, and if the sheep graze on it for a period of time, it causes addiction, a lack of coordination, and depression. There was a vet that they called in, this farmer called in, and he said they were displaying erratic behavior similar to that of a drunk. They lose weight to start with. Hello. I was down to 170 pounds. Imagine that. They get staggery, Then the progression gets worse. They become uncoordinated and depressed. They don't know where their feet are, and they become recumbent. They fall and they die that way. Well, the sheep doesn't. I'm not a sheep whisperer, but they don't have common sense like a human being. So it just shows that it's a primal response. You become addicted, and it's just all about the substance. It doesn't matter whether you're a sheep or a rat or a human.
Exactly.
It's not a choice.
You know, with my daughter, when she died, I had a lot of her drug buddies. They says, well, you have overdoses all the time, but you're not supposed to die. It's like, what? That's reality. Okay, you get lucky for so long.
Yeah.
That's what addiction does. Ladies and gentlemen, every 24 minutes, someone is dying of an overdose. This is killing more people from our wars, from cancer, any other disease.
We said all forms of cancer, HIV, AIDS, war, and car accidents combined.
It's just crazy.
Is the disease of addiction takes 188,000 lives in the United States every year.
Well, the $100 million that senator or whatever, the representative or whatever he wants to put out, instead of putting this towards treatment and education, wouldn't that be a better way to go? Wouldn't that be a better way to go? These senators and our representatives, they really trip me out. They always think the solution is just put people in prisons. But let's get back to education and treatment and taking care of our people. These people are sick. And there's got to be better solutions than what we have. Let's open up the dialogue. Let's get with these representatives. Let's get with these senators where they're actually doing something to help our fellow man. Like I said, I can't bring my daughter back, but I want things to really change in her name. I want her to be remembered, not somebody that died of an overdose, but from her story. From when you hear Brianna Johari's name, I want people to know how many did she save? Mm-hmm. How many people did she save from her story? And that's why I pick up this torch. And that's like my fuel, my fuel to do this. And along the way, I'm sure we're going to lose a lot of people. But, it doesn't matter if it's 1 or 10 or 20 or however. If we save one, then we've done something. It's better than just sitting on the sidelines and not doing nothing.
Yeah. What does Bob always talk to us about the starfish? You can't save them all, but if one at a time.
Exactly.
And it's, you and I are on the same page spiritually about a lot of things. And I said, I have no doubt that Brianna's smiling down. I mean, it was a tragedy. I'm sure if it was self-will, things would have been much different for her life. But she's got to be proud of what you're doing, and she's got to be, I can't speak for her, obviously, but she's got to be proud of herself in the fact that, yes, it was a tragedy, but John Doe, Jane Doe, Mary Smith, people, faces that we'll never see, names we'll never hear, emails that we're not going to get, text messages that we're not going to get. It's changing people's lives.
Exactly.
It really is. I mean, you get phone calls, emails, text messages, kids coming up and talking to you after the program. I get them, family members, strangers on the street, and God, forget about the paycheck. That's not what it's about.
Exactly.
It really isn't.
Exactly.
So.
And just to let you know, we do not get a paycheck.
No. No, I can attest to that.
Well, our time's almost up, but I just want to thank you for joining us today. Please become part of the conversation. That's the only way that things can get done is by your input and what you've got to say. it's easy to just be quiet and nothing's gonna, change. I guess if you keep doing the same thing with the same results, then it's time to make a change.
Yeah, insanity.
Okay. Insanity, exactly. Again, thanks for joining us today. Join our conversation. I'm Sam Jahari.
And I'm Rush Limbaugh. No, Charlie Buckley.
Have a great day.
Thanks, folks.